In-silico clinical trials are like real clinical trials, but executed in silico in the computer. That means that we create a virtual population that represents specific characteristics of the actual population that we would run the clinical trial in. And then, just as in a real clinical trial, we execute a control arm and a specific therapy in that virtual population. This is not a frequent occurrence because it would mean that we can, to a very high degree of certainty, reproduce both the population and the therapy under study and convince the regulators that this evidence is in fact enough to immediately release the product onto the market rather than go through a clinical trial. This is something that might happen, for example, in improvements or iterations of medical devices that have already been on the market and for which the in silico models have already been very well verified and validated. Another application for in silico clinical trials is to augment existing trials where we, for instance, like in cases with orphan medications or pediatric situations where we don't have the numbers or where we cannot run clinical studies. There, the in silico population can help to reach the target numbers that we need to actually come up with conclusive decisions after the trial.
With regard to the health system, the use of in silico modeling in medical device development may have many different types of implications. For patients, it may lead to a faster access to new or improved treatments due to an acceleration in development and approval of medical devices. If prices can be lowered through the use of in silico modeling, then this may lead to lower expenditures for payers in the health system, which may in turn even further facilitate access for patients. If virtual cohorts are comprehensively developed and sufficiently validated, they may lead to an increase in patient safety in general and in clinical trials specifically. Moreover, in silico modeling may allow for testing medical devices in diverse patient groups like children, pregnant women, or patients with rare diseases.
Regarding the effects of in silico on the medical device market, it's likely that if patient data and simulation models are open source, that all companies can profit from faster development and from lower costs. And therefore, this may lead to an increase in competition and also in innovation. If, on the other hand, this is not the case, then it may be the case that only the large companies are able to develop and use simulation models and also generate patient data, and therefore their market power may increase.
Considering the impact on society, in silico trials might support and more equitable access to healthcare services by an improvement with clinical trials for more population groups. Additionally, more economic activity might be facilitated due to the fact that more access to healthcare services might reduce sickness days. The society's concern about abolishing or reducing animal studies might also be addressed by in silico testing.
In silico clinical trials have been claimed to have the aim of replacing traditional trials, both preclinical on animals and clinical in humans. How this can be achieved? It's by anticipating effects on virtual population of patients, predicting how a certain population will react, and thereby guiding the design of experiment of a new trial. In that way, we can reduce the cohort size of the real trial, for instance. How this is done, I mean, there are plenty of possibilities that are investigated by different projects. For instance, SimCore is really trying to represent virtual population of the cardiac system to evaluate the properties of devices such as the TAVI and PAPS, and really investigating the effect of those devices with numerical methods can allow to evaluate identify parameters that could not be identified experimentally anyway. It doesn't have to completely replace animal experiment or clinical trials, but it can inform it and reduce it largely. Actually, if we talk to experts, some do think that there's a future for which clinical trials can entirely replace, but some experts think it's going to be complementary, actually.